The night air was colder than usual for early November, and the wind that cut through the narrow streets of Brookdale felt like it had a personal grudge against the poor. Street lamps buzzed weakly, illuminating patches of broken sidewalk and puddles reflecting the dull orange glow above. Gabriel Hayes tightened his worn denim jacket around his chest and kept his arm around the small shoulders of his daughter, Lily. She was only 7, but she walked with a quiet strength that didn't match her age. Her pink gloves were frayed at the fingertips, but she didn't complain, not about the cold, not about the hunger, and not about the fact that her father hadn't been able to buy groceries in 3 days. They had just left the 24-hour diner where Gabriel had managed to get her a small bowl of soup hours earlier. He had paid with coins in the last crumpled dollar he had. The waitress, who had seen them before, didn't ask questions. She only gave Lily an extra piece of bread and a smile that carried more pity than warmth. Their apartment, if it could even be called that, was a single room above a laundromat. The paint on the door peeled like sunburned skin, and the heater made more noise than heat. Yet it was home, and for the last 2 years, it had been the only constant in their lives. Gabriel worked odd jobs wherever he could, plumbing repairs, unloading delivery trucks, assembling furniture for people who didn't have the patience for instructions. But lately, the jobs had dried up. The town wasn't unkind, just tired, just worn, just stretched like him. As they approached the steps to their building, Lily tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, can we get hot chocolate tomorrow?" she asked softly, not with demand, but hope. Gabriel smiled at her even though his stomach clenched. "If I get a job in the morning, sweetheart, I'll make sure you have the biggest cup they can make." She nodded, satisfied, and climbed the steps ahead of him. He watched her with that familiar ache in his chest, an ache made of love, guilt, and unshakable determination. But fate, it seemed, had another stop planned before the night could end. As they neared the front door, Gabriel saw a shape curled up beside the stair rail. A woman, bundled beneath an oversized coat, hunched over, hair tangled, face half hidden under a fraying scarf. She shivered hard enough for the motion to be visible even in the dim light. Lily paused. "Daddy, is she okay?" Gabriel hesitated. He had nothing left, not money, not food, not even certainty for tomorrow. Yet something in him refused to walk past. "Stay by the door," he whispered to Lily. He approached slowly. "Ma'am, are you hurt? Do you need help?" The woman looked up. Her eyes were tired, but there was a strange clarity in them, as though she saw everything and nothing at once. "I'll be fine," she said, her voice brittle from the cold. "Just needed somewhere to rest." Gabriel knew the look, pride stitched with desperation. The same look he'd seen in his reflection too many times. He shrugged off his jacket and held it toward her. "Take it, the nights get colder here." She shook her head. "No, you need it more than I do." "I'll manage," he insisted gently, placing it around her shoulders. She stared at him in disbelief, then lowered her gaze. "Thank you." Lily stood silently, watching her father with wide, soft eyes. Gabriel went inside and came back a moment later with the last bit of food they owned, half a sandwich wrapped in a napkin and a bottle of water. "It's not much," he said, "but it'll help for tonight." The woman hesitated, then accepted it with trembling hands. She didn't eat right away. She just held it close, as though the gesture itself had filled something deeper than hunger. "What's your name?" Gabriel asked softly. "Eleanor," she murmured. "I'm Gabriel, and this is Lily." Lily offered a small wave. Eleanor's lips twitched into the ghost of a smile. "You're kind, Gabriel." He didn't feel kind. He felt cold, broke, and terrified of tomorrow. But he nodded. "Try to get some rest. If you're still here in the morning, we'll figure something out." He ushered Lily upstairs. Inside their apartment, the air was still and stale. Lily kicked off her shoes and climbed into bed without complaint. Gabriel tucked her in with the same care he always did, then sat on the edge watching her drift off. His own stomach growled. He ignored it. He stared at the window where a sliver of moonlight crept in and whispered a silent prayer he didn't dare voice aloud. Down on the street, Eleanor pulled his jacket tightly around herself and ate the sandwich slowly, each bite a memory of years she thought she'd left behind. Morning came without permission. The sun did little to soften the cold. Gabriel woke before Lily, his thoughts already racing. Rent was overdue. Groceries were gone. And yet, his first thought was of the woman downstairs. He eased out of the apartment and peered over the stair rail. She was gone. His jacket, however, was folded neatly on their doorstep with surprising care. Something about that made him pause. He picked it up, puzzled, and went back inside. Lily was awake now, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Dad, did you get a job?" "Not yet," he said softly, brushing her hair back. "But today's not over." He made her a cup of warm water with a little sugar, poor man's hot chocolate, he called it, and she drank it with a smile because she trusted him completely. That trust was a weight and a shield all at once. By noon, he had checked 3 potential job sites with no luck. Dusk was already crawling across the sky when they reached home again. And that's when everything changed. A long, sleek black limousine was parked outside their building, gleaming like a misplaced jewel amid rusted cars and littered curbs. Its engine was off, but a suited driver stood by the rear door. Neighbors whispered from their windows. Lily clung to Gabriel's hand. "Daddy, whose car is that?" "I don't know," he murmured. The driver stepped forward as they approached. "Mr. Hayes." Gabriel froze. "Yes, Ms. Eleanor Kingsley is expecting you." The name hit like a bolt he couldn't place. Then the rear door opened. And out stepped the woman from the night before, not in rags, not trembling with cold, but in a tailored coat of deep charcoal, her hair brushed and shining, her posture straight with quiet authority. Gabriel blinked. Lily stared, wide-eyed. Eleanor approached them with a calm grace. "May we speak inside?" Gabriel hesitated only a second before nodding. He led them upstairs, feeling as though the world had tilted on its axis. Inside the small apartment, Eleanor looked around without judgment or pity, only intent. She turned to Gabriel. "You spent what little you had to help a stranger," she said quietly. "Most people walk past. You didn't." Gabriel said nothing. He didn't know what to say. Eleanor continued, her voice low but steady. "I wasn't always wealthy. I know what it is to be invisible, to be dismissed as a burden. Last night, I needed to remember whether compassion still existed without cameras, without reward." Lily glanced up at her father, then back at Eleanor. "I'm the CEO of Kingsley Industries. I built the company from nothing. But I never forgot where I came from. And I never forgot the kind of people who lifted me when I had nothing." Gabriel swallowed hard. Eleanor took a folded document from her bag and placed it on the small table beside the rickety chair. "This is an employment contract. Full-time. Benefits. Housing assistance. I've already spoken to property management about moving you and Lily into one of our corporate apartments. It's safe, warm, and close to your new job location." He stared, stunned. "Why would you do this?" "Because you gave when you had nothing," she answered simply. "And because the world changes one decision at a time." He opened his mouth to protest, but Lily's small hand slipped into his. Her eyes were bright with something he hadn't seen in months, hope unshadowed by fear. Eleanor knelt to Lily's level. "And you, young lady, will have your hot chocolate tomorrow. The real kind." Lily beamed. Gabriel felt something break inside him, not in pain, but release. The tightness of years, the exhaustion of carrying the world alone, the belief that nothing good ever came without cost, it all cracked. He sank into the chair, overwhelmed. Eleanor stepped back. "The limo is yours for as long as you need it today. You start Monday, if you accept." Gabriel nodded, unable to speak. She smiled faintly. "Then I'll see you soon." "And Gabriel," he looked up, "never apologize for kindness. It's the one currency that never loses value." With that, she left, the driver opening the door as though she were royalty. But to Gabriel, she wasn't a CEO or a mystery, she was proof that the smallest act of giving could echo louder than despair. Lily climbed into his lap and hugged him tight. "Daddy," she whispered, "you helped her, and she helped us." He closed his eyes, holding her close. "That's how the world should work, sweetheart." Outside, the limo waited like a promise. And for the first time in a very long while, Gabriel didn't feel like a man at the end of his road. He felt like a father who had finally turned a corner. Gabriel sat in the stillness of the apartment long after the sound of the limo's engine faded into the cold evening air. The draft from the window no longer felt like an enemy clawing at his bones. Something in the silence had shifted, like the world had inhaled and, for once, exhaled in his favor. Lily had fallen asleep on his lap, her arms wrapped around him as though her small body knew how to hold all the emotions he couldn't voice. He carried her to the bed gently and tucked the blanket around her, his hands trembling not from fear, but from the weight of long-awaited relief. He sat back down and stared at the contract Eleanor had left on the table. The letters on the page seemed unreal, like a dream scribbled onto paper. Full-time employment, salary, housing assistance, medical benefits. Words that had no place in the life he'd been living. And yet, there they were, not as a fantasy, but as an offer born from something simple and true, kindness without expectation. He didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, memories came flooding in, nights spent counting change under dim lights, mornings hoping for a phone call, afternoons pretending his stomach didn't hurt so Lily could eat. The exhaustion of years clung to him, but for the first time, the exhaustion didn't feel like failure. It felt like a battle that was finally ending. By dawn, the sky opened with a soft wash of pink and gray. The street outside, often harsh and indifferent, looked gentler in the new light. Gabriel made warm water with sugar again and set it by Lily's bedside so she could wake to something sweet. He watched her sleep for a few minutes, her face peaceful, the kind of peace children should always have but so rarely do when life has been unkind. When she finally stirred and stretched, she blinked up at him. "Daddy, is it real? The car, the job, the house." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "It's real. Do we have to leave here today?" "Not today, but soon." Lily looked around the room as if taking a silent inventory of everything she'd ever known. The faded curtains, the chipped nightstand, the single lamp that flickered every time it turned on. Will the new place have windows that don't make noises? Gabriel let out a breath that wanted to become a laugh. "I think it might." She smiled and crawled into his arms, and for a long moment, nothing else existed but the quiet certainty that somehow, through everything, they had reached the other side of something dark. The hours that followed passed in a strange blend of disbelief and preparation. The property manager arrived mid-morning, a polite woman in her 50s with a stack of forms and keys on a ring that jingled like a bell. She wore a look that hovered between curiosity and respect, and she wasted no time. "Mr. Hayes," she said, stepping inside for only a moment. "Your unit will be ready tomorrow afternoon. 2 bedrooms, furnished, utilities covered. Eleanor spoke very highly of you." Gabriel could only nod. Lily peeked from behind his leg, her curiosity outweighing shyness for once. The woman handed him a folder of documents with addresses, instructions, and contact numbers. She smiled at Lily before she left, and that small kindness made Gabriel's throat tighten again. When the door closed, he sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled with the weight of years pressing out of his lungs. He kept expecting something to go wrong, as if mercy had a limit and he had already taken more than his share. But every time his doubt tried to speak, Lily's face silenced it. That afternoon, the limo returned, not to impress, but to serve as transportation to the city office where Gabriel would complete his onboarding paperwork. The driver treated them with a quiet dignity that made Gabriel feel like more than a man who'd been fighting the world barehanded. He signed what needed signing, shook hands with people he never imagined he'd meet, and listened as his responsibilities were explained clearly and respectfully. Maintenance supervisor for several residential properties owned by Kingsley Industries. A job that valued his hard-earned skills instead of dismissing them. On the ride back, Lily pressed her face to the window and watched the world pass with a joy that filled the air between them. When they stepped out in front of the building for the last time, Eleanor was waiting. She stood by the sidewalk, hands clasped loosely, her expression soft but unreadable. "You look like a man who slept with one eye open," she said. Gabriel managed a small, almost disbelieving smile. "I haven't quite convinced myself this is real." Eleanor nodded once. "You don't have to convince yourself today. Just keep walking in the direction it leads." He hesitated before asking, "Why me? There must be people who've lost more, suffered more." She studied him carefully. "The world doesn't change because of the ones who take from it. It changes because of the ones who give, even when they have nothing left. I've learned that the people who lift others from their knees are the ones who can be trusted to carry responsibility. You didn't wait for someone to deserve kindness, you gave it freely. That's not something I overlook." Lily stepped beside her father and looked up at Eleanor with complete sincerity. "Are you staying for hot chocolate too?" Eleanor blinked, a flicker of surprise softening her features further. "Not today, little one. But soon." Lily nodded as though a promise had been spoken. Eleanor turned back to Gabriel. "Tomorrow, the truck for moving will arrive. Everything you want to take with you can go. Everything else can stay, we'll handle it. Focus on your start, not your past." He swallowed hard. "I don't know how to thank you. I didn't do this alone," she replied gently. "You started it when you laid your coat on someone you thought was beneath the world's notice. You already paid your part." Then she stepped into the limo, and the door closed with the quiet finality of a chapter ending. That night, Gabriel and Lily packed their lives into 2 suitcases and a box of memories, pictures, handmade cards, a blanket his sister had given Lily years ago, and a mug with a crack down the side. The rest, they left. The apartment felt less like abandonment and more like the shell of something they had finally outgrown. As the lights dimmed and Lily fell asleep one last time in the only home she remembered clearly, Gabriel stood by the window and looked at the street below. The concrete was the same. The shadows were the same. But something in him wasn't. He no longer felt like a man bracing himself against the world. He felt like a man standing in the space between what was and what might finally be. The next morning dawned soft and pale. The moving team arrived, polite and efficient. By noon, the old apartment was empty. Gabriel lifted Lily into the back seat of the car sent for them and took one last look up the worn staircase. He didn't feel loss, just release. When they reached the new building, it was nothing like the world they'd known. Clean hallways, quiet elevators, doors without chipped paint, windows that sealed, a kitchen with real counters. A room for Lily where she spun in circles just to feel the space around her. Gabriel stood in the center of the living room, the late afternoon light spreading across the floor like a warm invitation. For the first time in his adult life, he allowed himself to imagine a future not built on fear. That evening, Lily sat on the couch with a mug of real hot chocolate in her hands, steam curling into the air. She looked at her father with a smile that carried every dream she'd never dared to say aloud. "Daddy," she said in a hushed voice, "I think this is what happy feels like." Gabriel sat beside her and put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. He looked out the wide window where the world stretched open and waiting. "Yes," he murmured, "I think it is," and in that moment, he understood something simple, something he'd been too tired to believe before. Kindness may not always echo immediately, but when it returns with a force that rewrites lives. He had given without hope of reward, and what came back was not payment, but transformation. The world had not changed overnight, but his had, and for the first time in years, Gabriel knew he would never again walk it alone.